Einashu watched the sun slowly start to set from her office. While she was convinced that not a single sunset in the verse could beat the beauty of those in the home world, she could concede that those of Horizon made for a reasonably palatable alternative. Sighing, she turned back to her computer, where messages were continuing to stream into her account. She didn't need to read them. She already knew what they'd say, albeit written in a great many more words. The Blue Bloods weren't happy about the outcome of yesterday's exercise. Not that she could blame them. If she'd been whooped as badly as that Dasari girl had been, well, she'd have trouble accepting it too. Brought down by a single pod of plucky recruits, the General thought, as she looked out the window towards the training grounds. Training grounds that were empty right now. The recruits, all of them, had been let loose to celebrate their victory and imminent graduation. She didn't begrudge them that, though as she saw another message from the Dasari estate arrive in her inbox, she did begrudge them the piles of complaints said victory had brought her. The Dasari girl had no one else to blame but herself, though. They'd always known the human would be a wild card. The Imperium's time on Earth had taught the Shilvanti that much, if nothing else. While the censors had done an admirable job of keeping the appearance of stability on the world and out in the Greater Imperium, the occupation of Earth had been and was anything but smooth. Certainly none of her training staff had been able to say exactly what the human would do, but many had suspected he might do something. Though just as many had been quick to point out that, while the Earthling had been an excellent recruit, he hadn't done anything particularly outlandish. On the training field, at least. To hear her instructors giggling like maidens behind closed doors, he had apparently pulled off some quite spectacular things with his fellow recruits in his off hours. Still, the Dasari girl had ignored all of it. She and her cronies had been the ones to insist that regular recruits be included in the exercise. For what reason, Einashu didn't know. Something nefarious, no doubt, but when you reach the rank of general, you learn to pick your battles. Sending out a bunch of fresh recruits to get trounced by the interior was hardly the end of the world, and a small price to pay for a favour from one of the Dasari's line. It hadn't earned her a favour, though. It had gotten her the Dasari's enmity, all because the recruits didn't get trounced. Or rather, a single pod of them didn't. The rest had gotten trashed, as expected, stumbling straight into an ambush before being hunted down piecemeal. One group had escaped, and turned it all around in a rather spectacular manner. She doubted the boy would be able to buy his own drink tonight even if he wanted to, though given how exotic a reputation humans had already garnered in the galaxy at large, she doubted that was an uncommon occurrence. Though with any luck, with half of his graduating cadre and half the local militia with him when he left, there wouldn't be another incident like his first night out on the town. Still getting concerned messages from the aristocrats? Einashu looked up to see her raid and poked her head into her office. You know it, the general said. None of them quite have the tits to out and accuse me of cheating, but plenty of them are insinuating it. January moved in, sitting on her superior's desk as she swiveled the computer screen around. In different circumstances, that kind of action would warrant some serious disciplining, but the two had worked together for a long time. In public, January was as respectful to the general as her position demanded, but in private both of them were far more relaxed. Ooh. To suggest that the Imperium would bow to the demands of rebels is a statement bordering on treasonous. January smiled. I'll have to remember that one next time one of Nier's spawn gets herself captured by pirates while partying out in the periphery. Einashu just grunted. Prisoner exchanges were a tradition as old as dirt for the Shilvanti, at least for the nobility. To suggest that the Dasari wouldn't negotiate for the release of their daughter was patently absurd. They would have pulled in every favour and leaned on every official they could to get the brat released. She knew that, and that was why she called an end to the exercise. Plenty of people could dislike that decision, but no one could argue that it wasn't realistic. And that was the whole purpose of these exercises, to simulate a real event. The human just so happened to be the only one smart or crazy enough to remember that fact and factor it into his strategy. They're calling him the next Asidro Tonelli, Einashu said, keeping her voice deliberately even. January scoffed, which was really the only thing a reasonable person should do when they heard a statement like that. Unfortunately, the Imperium seemed to have a deficit of reasonable people recently. His plan was clever, Janare said. Using the storm drains was unexpected. Using the Dasari girl as a bargaining chip was good too. The rest of it, though, I can count 4 separate points where a half-decent garrison would have caught him. Inishu nodded. The interior had some pretty decent soldiers, incomparable to the regular military of course, but some decent troops. Dasari and her ilk, though, little more than bravado backed up by fancy toys brought using Mummy's money. Dasari, the big one, is trying to save face, she growled. It wasn't that her little girl was incompetent. It was that the human was some kind of tactical savant. Poor human, Janare said simply. Inishu couldn't argue. That kind of attention wasn't good for anyone. The politics of the imperial nobility was a heskpit at the best of times, and a human would soon be just the kind of novelty that attracted them. It's always the cute ones, she said mournfully. January made a so-so gesture. They can last as long in bed as they like. I'll take a Shilvanti boy over a human any day. Inishu glanced at the woman. Really? Not even once? Her rage shrugged. I just can't get over the hair. Ugh. The general laughed as she moved through the files on her desktop. Such a prude. The hair's the best bit. Just the sensations of bristles running along your skin. Eventually, her cursor hovered over a fairly innocuous video file labelled helmetcam.blueteam.pod7.unit1. She already knew what it showed. She'd seen it within a minute of the events depicted within occurring, when a concerned instructor had sent it to her. It had shown the human kicking a sleeping recruit's helmet under her bed. Attempted murder, given the inferno that later engulfed the building. She mentally tuned out the sound of her friend chastising her for her Rakiri fetish as she deleted the file. If anyone tried to find it, they would get a report that would inform them that the file had been corrupted due to a fault with the camera, a lie the instructor would back up. Inishu wasn't usually one to forgive attempted murder. Under different circumstances, the human would have already been arrested. These weren't the usual circumstances, though. You can thank Recruit Nui for this, human, the general thought, as she filled out the form. The general could ill abide traitors, but she could abide attempted rapists even less. She also well understood the need for vengeance. While political realities meant those women would likely never see punishment for their crimes, Inishu's position at least allowed her to shield her recruit from the repercussions of his attempt to garner some small amount of justice with his own 2 hands. Perhaps an official attempt for a real punishment might have been possible if the victim and witness had come forward the night of the crime, but privately the general doubted it. While she couldn't condone it, she well understood why the human hadn't done so, which was why it was fortunate for him that one of his friends had. It's not a Rakiri fetish, the general said, turning back to her friend without missing a beat. It's called taste.